Broadcasting from the Unshackled studios in Melbourne. This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net. Now here's Tim Wilms.
Hello everyone and welcome to this start of week edition of WilmsFront on this Monday, the 19th of October 2020. We are live on the WilmsFront YouTube and DLive channels, as well as on the Unshackled's Facebook page. Hello to everyone in the live chats. And as always, with every show, we are live on the Entropy, the interactive live streaming software, which you can join throughout the show by clicking on the link in the description or the live chat, which I put throughout the show. It is 7 p.m. here in Melbourne, where we've taken one step out of the world's longest lockdown. We are no longer house arrest, but our freedom to associate with our fellow human beings is still severely limited, with still no visitors permitted to private homes under the threat of a $5,000 fine. Retail remains click and collect only, and hospitality still takeaway only. This means that grand final week is pretty much fully cancelled here in Melbourne. Of course, the irony being that it is two Melbourne teams in the 2020 grand final at the Gabba in Brisbane this Saturday evening, Geelong and Richmond. As a Brisbane Lions supporter, obviously I'm very gutted with Saturday night's result. As they say, there's always next year. The 5-kilometre travel radius from your home has been expanded to 25 kilometres. There is now no time limit on when you can leave your home for the permitted reasons. They are shopping, exercising, seeking or giving medical care, socialising in public with one other person or household. And it also means you can go golfing or fishing. And from today, also getting your hair cut, with hairdressers open from today. I know that with my insanely long hair, which during these streams constantly goes over my forehead and eyes, I'm on the waiting list for a haircut. The next easing of restrictions will, at the latest, come on November 2. That is when Melbournians will have no restrictions on leaving the home and will be allowed up to 2 visitors each day to the private home, and retailers and hospitality venues will be able to reopen. There is still no end date on when the ring of steel separating Metro Melbournians from regional Victorians will be dismantled, when mandatory marks will end, or when places of worship, gyms and cinemas can be reopened. The federal government and its senior Victorian ministers have made it clear that with Victoria only having for the past 4 days, we had 2 on Friday, 2 new coronavirus cases, 1 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday, and 4 today, that the state should move to New South Wales rules. Despite this call from the federal Liberal government, we haven't heard from New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian or South Australian Premier Stephen Marshall, who are both Liberals, when they will reopen the borders to Victorians. All states and territories, apart from Western Australia, have committed to opening their borders by Christmas. The state border closures and the cruelty and suffering that they have caused throughout 2020, that will come to its first political climax with the Queensland state election on October 31st, where Labor Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk is centering her re-election message that she kept Queenslanders safe from COVID. She is ahead in the polls currently, with the Liberal National Party opposition, led by Deb Frecklington, seeming to continue their self-destructive ways right up to the campaign itself. Then early November, the High Court will hear Clive Palmer's challenge to Western Australia's hard border closure, which we learnt last week is not based on medical advice from its chief medical officer. Premier Mark McGowan has previously said that he liked the hard border because it meant WA income was being spent in WA, a clear violation of Section 92 of Australia's Constitution, which guarantees free trade, commerce and intercourse between the states. There were 2 elections on Saturday evening. The ACT election with Chief Minister Andrew Barr winning his Labor Party a 6th term in government. With the hair clerk system that the ACT users, they will be able to retain government, the ACT Labor Party, with the Greens. Over in New Zealand, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern's Labor Party won a second term, winning an outright majority in the New Zealand House of Representatives. The National Party opposition, led by Judith Collins, suffered a crushing loss, winning less than half of the seats that the Labor Party won. The minor parties that gained representation in the New Zealand Parliament are the local Greens Party and the ACT Libertarian Party, and also the Maori Party. Now, I'll just go through the current provisional results as it stands on Monday. So here we have the New Zealand Labor Party on 49.1% of the votes, New Zealand National Party 26.8%, the ACT Party 8%, the Greens 7.6%, and the Maori Party 1%. This gives the Labor Party 64 seats out of 120 in the New Zealand Parliament, National Party 35, the ACT Party 10, the Green Party 10, and the Maori Party 1. They got that seat. They won one of the Maori electorates. Though the New Zealand general election wasn't the only news to come out of New Zealand to Australians on the weekend. We covered these election results as they came in with our Trad Tasman Talk special election night live stream, which you can watch on replay on the Unshackled's YouTube channel. But on Friday, the one-way trans-Tasman bubble to New South Wales and the Northern Territory began, which has seen close to 100 New Zealanders, once they've landed in New South Wales, travel on to Victoria, South Australia and Western Australia. Even though New Zealand is basically COVID-free, all of these state premiers, including Daniel Andrews, have hit out at the federal government and Australian Border Force for allowing trans-Tasman travel to occur. It is important to make the point that both Victoria and South Australia have not closed their borders to New South Wales. So anyone residing in New South Wales currently, including now New Zealanders, can travel into those states. And I know that Acting Immigration Minister Alan Tudge posted on his Twitter this morning. This is from the actual Victorian Department of Health and Human Services website today. Travelling to Victoria from New Zealand, a trans-Tasman, it's actually spelt wrong there. It says MIN, M-I-N. It's actually spelt M-A-N. Travel bubble is currently in place between New Zealand and parts of Australia. This allows travellers from New Zealand to arrive in New South Wales and Northern Territory without having to quarantine for 14 days on arrival. Currently, the Victorian borders are open. If you're travelling from New Zealand and have passed all relevant immigration and biosecurity requirements as established by the federal government, New South Wales government and Northern Territory government, you're able to travel into Victoria. You do not need to quarantine for 14 days on arrival in Victoria. So there you go there. Daniel Andrews wasn't aware what was published on his own health department's website, which is again typical Daniel Andrews not actually reflecting in his daily press conferences what is actually the truth of the matters. It's fair to say that Victorians and Melbournians wouldn't be on this brink back to freedom without the lobbying and activism of ordinary Victorians, plus good members of the Melbourne Press Pack, News Corp's Rachel Baxendale, Alex White, Sophie Ellsworth and Gabriella Power. They've asked Dan questions that Victorians deserve the answers to. But the standout has clearly been Sky News host and Tony Abbott's former Chief of Staff, Peter Credlin, who has pushed for the Hotel Quarantine Board of Inquiry for them to ask for Dan and his public servant's phone records so we can edge closer to who made the fateful decision to hire unified security to guard hotel quarantine, which has been responsible for the state's deadly second wave, which has at this moment killed 798 Victorians. There was another death linked to aged care reported today. So the consequence of Peter Credlin's digging into all of the submissions and documents. She was on Credland just before this show, revealing more about what has been in the latest submission dumps. The board will hold an extraordinary hearing tomorrow. Probably the biggest development from the weekend is that phone and email records revealed that Victoria's Chief Health Officer, Brett Sutton, was aware that hotel quarantine arrangements that they were using private security from the beginning, which is not what he told the inquiry. All eyes will be back on this inquiry hearing, which starts tomorrow at 2:15 p.m. Last week, people power finally prevailed, with the Andrews government dropping the preventative detention powers from its COVID omnibus bill. Many community activists organised mass email campaigns to put pressure on the politicians to scrap, or at very least modify, the omnibus bill, which did pass through both houses of the Victorian Parliament. Millie Fontana was one of these activists. She is one of the many ordinary Melbournians who I've met throughout 2020 who've gotten active and helped to lift the wool off many Victorians' eyes that these continuing lockdowns are causing more harm than good and have resulted in pretty much a police state here in Victoria. Millie, welcome to the show.
Hi, Tim. How are you going?
Yeah, I'm feeling a bit more free today, but it's a lot of people online have put it quite eloquently that we've been fed some more breadcrumbs. Obviously, well, we hope that it's 2 weeks maximum when the lockdown is fully lifted, but we should never take anything as a given in Dan's Victoria.
Yeah, definitely. I think he's really dangling the carrot in front of us of freedom.
So we had 4 cases today. Obviously, it got as low as 1 on Saturday, and of course, we've seen. I mentioned the good journalists before in my intro, but we have the hyperbolic media outlets, 7 and 9 News. They've been so bad. I was half expecting them to say yesterday our cases have doubled, and then they could say today our cases have quadrupled since Saturday, because we know how alarmist they like to be. I mean, they last week with the Kilmore and Shepparton outbreaks, they were claiming, oh, this is going to be a third wave, but I think even Dan and his DHHS Deputy Secretary Jerome Weiner were actually shocked that, our contact tracing was actually good. We controlled these clusters in Kilmore and Shepparton.
Yeah, they really took the term super spreader and ran with it as best they possibly could, even though Brett Sutton had said there was no quantifiable way to define a super spreader. So I thought that was interesting.
Well, the media was sort of calling this truck driver who went to Kilmore and Shepparton as like a super duper spreader, but they only found out last week that he'd also been to Shepparton, and he visited there on September 30. Three people came forward with symptoms, tested positive, then basically the whole town tested positive. They found no more positives. So, which is good, which basically shows if anyone did have the virus after that, then it had gone through their system already.
Yeah, one thing I'm pretty firm on with the testing is that, unless there's a clinical diagnosis to back it up, why are we even taking it seriously because of how faulty the PCR tests are? So I don't read too far into it. I feel like if we get more than maybe 2 cases, then we can look at saying, well, hey, maybe somebody was genuinely sick, but it's really hard to tell what is a false positive versus an actual active case.
Well, I'm not sure about you, but I read the daily show releases, as they're called, and there's always, most days, the reclassifications, because the overall total can be less than new cases. Or as it was yesterday, there were 2 new cases, but 4 reclassifications. That's code for false positives, because they actually reported in the show release today that one of the new cases today was somebody who tested positive previously in July. And we actually heard from, I can't remember if it was Brett Sutton or Jerome Weiner, that, yes, somebody who has had it before, they can test positive again because they've that they've had it before. And there was recently last week a man who tested positive in Geelong had previously tested positive, but that was another false positive.
Yeah, can't tell the difference between active and non-active RNA. So pretty fun.
And obviously have you been tested?
No, not at all.
No. Yeah, it's as we both know, it's the most invasive test you could possibly imagine. Basically, it's a brain swab up your nose and then jam down your throat as well. But we're told the saliva tests, which have a quicker turnaround and are less invasive, they're still not as accurate as the as that swab test. And I'm thinking, what, with even all these false positives, it's still referred to the gold standard, that invasive test?
Yeah, well, even the I presume the saliva one would be the antibody test that you're talking about. So it's even less accurate because, again, we're not even looking at current cases when we look at antibody tests. It really is, have you had it before? Because it's going to show up positive if you have, and it shows up positive as well for other viruses. But yeah, my GP actually tried to push a test on me just this past week for completely unrelated medical stuff, and it was one of those things where she's like, oh, you should really get a test if you're going to be in this clinic. And, I just sort of smelt the bullshit there on that one. I'm like, no, you and I both know that I don't have this virus. So why are you trying to push this test on me when I've clearly said that I don't want it?
And we hear Daniel Andrews repeat day after day because he's still doing the daily press briefings. He's done over 100 now, and it's clear that, well, given today how snappy he was about particularly Josh Frydenberg, the Federal Treasurer based from Victoria. People are complaining that there's still a bit of feedback on your end from what I'm saying. So you can fix that up. But yes, as I was,
is that better?
We'll see how we go. The audience is the barometer. If they continue to complain, then we know that there's still a problem. If there's no complaining, we know that it's fixed. That's how sort of audience feedback works. But
I've turned it all the way down, so it should be a little better.
Okay, excellent. Because he hit out at Josh Frydenberg, Dan Andrews, saying, he may be from Victoria, but he's not for Victoria. He's not a leader, he's just a Liberal, which was a pretty, I would say, pathetic political swipe, because I know that Josh Frydenberg, he would love to be doing his job as the Treasurer back here in Melbourne, but he can't because obviously we're sort of still in lockdown. So I get where Josh Frydenberg's coming from. Alan Tudge, Greg Hunt, and Dan Tehan, all senior federal government ministers. They even though they don't have to be here, they want to be here because this is their home as well.
Yeah, I think the border restrictions are a bit too tight, honestly. There should be some flexibility there, and there just doesn't seem to be anything. We're not really given any flexibility at all when it comes to our movements, and over such little case numbers as well.
Yeah, as I said in my introduction, how come the pressure is not on Gladys Berejiklian to open the southern border? I mean, if the average cases are now about the same, so what's stopping her? Why aren't people demanding Gladys Berejiklian tear down this wall? Stephen Marshall, South Australia, tear down this wall. I've sort of been I think the appropriate date for all the borders to be brought down it should be November the 9th. Which, of course, is the anniversary of the Berlin Wall coming down in 1989, because I'm not sure about you, but it feels like we're in East Berlin still.
It's out of control, to say the least. Sometimes you wake up and you think it's some sort of nightmare, and no, it's happening.
I know that even though we've been both active through the internet, obviously I've been still doing my regular shows. It does take an emotional toll on you, and especially when we were getting those, peaked at around 725 cases, but you began to lose hope during those dark days in early August, where, you'd get hope that, there's only 300 today, then the next day it'd be 600, then it'd go 400, then it'd be 700. And you just sort of, like there was no point in getting out of bed really, because it's like that was when our hope, I think, was at its lowest. Not so much because the cases were so high, but because you just knew that it was so far away that Dan was ever going to lift the stage 4 lockdown. Lost Millie for a moment there. I'm sure she'll be back shortly. Just a reminder to everyone to join and participate with the show on Entropy. That's where you can ask questions and also send through super chats. Millie's back here. Welcome back, Millie. I think we'll get her back shortly. But yes, hello to everyone watching us on both YouTube, Facebook, and DLive as well. The new streaming software that we're using, well, apart from when the internet itself messes up, has been going quite well, because I'm able to keep an eye on all the different chats here on both YouTube and Facebook as well, and see all your comments at the same time. I think Millie's.
I'm so sorry. I don't know what's going on there. It says the internet connection's fine. It's lying.
This is the other sort of I would say third world condition we live in as Australia. Our internet is so awful and expensive as well.
Yeah, apparently this is NBN, so it's going well.
Well, it was built by the government. We can thank Stephen Conroy for that, the former Labor architect of this centrally planned internet.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think we're at, yes, the fact that when we got to those hundreds of cases each day, we're pretty much all of us had like our you would say morale and hope was just so low, not because of the cases being high, but Dan was just never going to at that stage let us out of the lockdown.
Yeah, he's really made it as difficult as possible, and it's just so bizarre watching it from an outside perspective, or even an inside perspective, really. I'm living in it, but I guess like I'm a little detached maybe, and I'm looking outside in. Yeah, I just can't believe the unclear leadership. You know, we pay these people so much money to give us a plan and give us structure and lead us through a crisis. And he makes his decisions on the day according to case numbers. And to me, that is just so bizarre. I have no idea, why he chooses to do that. It's so uncertain, and we have no structure and no direction to really go in because of that. He won't plan day to day. He just makes it up as he goes along, quite literally.
Well, he's obviously the worst, Dan, but pretty much the Australian National Cabinet response throughout the whole pandemic and lockdown has pretty much been making it up as they go along. I mean, the other states and territories have been the same. Gladys Berejiklian today, she announced that gatherings can increase from 20 to 30, that hospitality is moving to a 2 square meter rule, even though they've sort of been having the same amount of cases for the past 2 months. And now Queensland, they've gone from 30 at private indoor and outdoor gatherings now to 40. And you just sort of think, these are all arbitrary figures, and as is Dan's, as his curfew was, and 25-kilometre radius, they just come to these arbitrary things.
Yeah, I think it's really weird, and there's a lot of pressure on the federal government at the moment in regard to what.
Millie's frozen again. We'll get it back in a moment. She'll rejoin again shortly. But yes, as I was saying, there's been some movement or relaxation, I should say, with the relaxation of restrictions in New South Wales and Queensland. But of course, the New South Wales-Queensland border is still shut, while there's sort of that buffer area between the northern New South Wales local government areas and Queensland itself. The cruelty that I was referring to with the Queensland border closure, obviously, those people who had surgeries, major surgeries like brain and cancer surgeries in Sydney, were forced into hotel quarantine in Brisbane. They weren't allowed to isolate at their private homes, despite the fact that they weren't going to leave. Are you back again?
I don't know what it is. It says it's fine. I don't know. Well, I'll just keep coming back. Consistency is key.
Yeah, luckily I'm good at padding and improvising and off the cuff, because when you do so many of these, you just learn to go with the technical hiccups. That happens to the mainstream media as well. When they cross to somebody, a reporter out in the field, and they can't hear them, and it's like, obviously we'll come back. There's a technical issue, or when they throw to a clip and either the clip doesn't come or they play the wrong clip.
I think you're doing well throwing out your facts while I'm sorting my life out. So,
we're going to the federal government, and yes, they've been, I would say, incredibly, if you want to be really harsh, weak. In terms of reining in these state premiers. They've enabled, I think, their power trips because state premiers have never had so much power before. And so there are certainly, well, we've seen Daniel Andrews' power trip on full display, but also Anastasia Palaszczuk as well. They are no longer a part of Clive Palmer's border challenge. They've just said, we just want the states to open the borders. They've just completely forgotten that there's this constitution here, which a trade, commerce and intercourse between the states shall not be limited.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely out of control. You sort of wonder who holds who accountable sometimes. It's like there's these polite conversations behind closed doors, and then we just let everyone do what they want anyway.
Now, obviously, we've been in this state of emergency, now state of disaster, varying degrees of restrictions and lockdowns here in Melbourne and Victoria for over 6 months. And there was certainly, I think, when the coronavirus first was spreading around Australia, we didn't know much about the virus because it came from communist China, and we know not to trust them that much. And the objective was, or the deal was, that we've got to have these lockdowns to flatten the curve so our health system's not overwhelmed. We flattened the curve probably about around mid-April. And so I was like, okay, we're flattening the curve. It's clear our health system is going to cope. Let's lift the lockdowns now. But that obviously didn't happen. And then we had this second wave in Victoria. We went to an even more draconian lockdown with stage 4 and the mask mandate. Is that when you obviously it took so much of a toll on you that you felt the need you needed to speak out and start being an activist?
I think for me, it began back in March. So I was following pretty closely a couple of scientists and doctors that were doing a lot of commentary on what was going on in Wuhan and explaining how the virus works and all that sort of stuff. And I still even think they were right about a lot of the things that they'd said in terms of the fact that what they were reporting is not really organic of a behavior of a virus. And one of the guys that I followed, he called it the honey badger virus. Chris Martinson, he's really cool. He's very thorough with what he goes through in terms of how these things work. And he said that, you know, based on what they're describing, this virus likely would have made its way through majority of the population anyway, based on, you know, how it was alleged to be so rapidly spreading. And he was sort of leaning towards it being less deadly than what they were giving it credit for because of the nature of it, you know, as it was alleged. And so, you know, obviously before you know what's going on, you pull yourself away from the situation and sort of wait before you start speaking. So obviously my ears were a bit pricked up from that, but I wasn't quite sure the severity of what we were dealing with. And it's only when I started to realize how minimal the threat was as more and more information came to light across the world that I sort of thought, well, this is insane. I'm really seeing the inconsistencies in their storyline. And so, I don't know, probably got to around June or July, really, when I started really thinking, okay, I want to step up and have a go at this and see what I can do to help to minimize the impact, I suppose, on us as people.
Yeah, because by that time we knew heaps more about the virus. That some of the more you would say alarmist claims about the virus that it's airborne were debunked. There's still this. This sort of fear put around that, even if you recover from coronavirus, it can basically cripple your internal organs for life, because there's a few people who've had ongoing health effects. But obviously with this second wave in Melbourne, which there was so much community transmission, I'm not sure about you, but I knew people who got the coronavirus, and obviously it wasn't pleasant. I had the flu last year. That wasn't pleasant either, but it certainly didn't change their view that these lockdowns were overkill when they got the virus. Obviously they were feeling crappy, but they're sort of like, what, we've shut down the whole of society for this. And even when they recovered, a lot of them recovered rapidly from it, but obviously couldn't leave their homes until their 14 days was up, or they'd tested negative again. So we also have it's over 20,000 people in Melbourne and Victoria who've been infected with the coronavirus. So there is obviously that local experience of a lot of people now.
Yeah, honestly, it's like viral pneumonia and the flu had a baby, from what I understand. It's not great, but people who would ordinarily be at risk from viral pneumonia and the flu are no more so at risk from this virus. And when we look at the figures to do with the previous flu deaths and all that jazz, it's all pretty obvious that the threat is quite consistent in terms of what we're seeing in the recovery rates here. So it's no more or less extreme. And yeah, no, I don't know anyone who's personally had it. I know people that have come up with a positive test result being completely fine and then had it come back negative the next time. But as far as actually coming down with the virus properly, nah. And it's few and far between as well.
Yeah, because we should also remember there are people who are asymptomatic. They test positive, but they feel relatively fine. I remember going back to March, Richard Wilkins got the coronavirus from Tom Hanks's wife, Rita Wilson, and he went on the Today Show via Skype when he was in isolation and said, "I feel fine."
Yeah, it's funny because I I think, you know, asymptomatic to me just registers straight away as false positive. I'd be more concerned about pre-symptomatic. So this is where like holes in the contact tracing become a concern, because we can say, you know, somebody would likely be pre-symptomatic if they come back with a positive test after being in close contact with somebody. But if you just take a random test when you feel fine and it comes back positive, I would not consider that to be an active case. And so the management of that in itself, I think, is quite concerning, in particular because we are using those numbers to justify locking down the entire state. So it's things like that that really motivated me to speak out about this stuff, because it doesn't make logical sense either.
I know the mainstream media have been running with this story here about this Instagram influencer who died of COVID after admitting he thought it was a hoax. He was a 33-year-old fitness influencer, and there's a photo of him there, Dimitri Skovbrik. Of course, they don't mention that he had already a pre-existing condition, a heart condition. And, well, I can probably speculate about this now that, well, he's passed, but there's obviously suspicion about steroid use as well, which wouldn't have helped his physical condition.
Yeah, definitely. As soon as I saw that, I jumped on the Instagram. I had to translate the captions because obviously it's in a foreign language, which is helpful for the mainstream media trying to spin the story, I'd imagine. But no, straight away you see all these comments about his heart condition and how he died of this heart condition, perhaps exacerbated by the coronavirus, but it's not directly caused by it. So again, it's just misleading headlines.
And I also saw the other day, I'll see if I can bring it up here. No, I can't find it here. But here it is here. A 17-year-old American girl who died from the coronavirus in North Dakota. And obviously you can see that, well, given her appearance, she probably had some underlying health conditions.
Yeah, most definitely. I was saying this a while ago when we look at America as well. You know, they're not the healthiest people. There's a lot of underlying health conditions over there, and their healthcare is nowhere near as good as ours. So when we look at things like that, density of the population, it's really disproportionate, the reaction that we're having to this virus, not being transparent about factoring in those things as well.
And of course, if you have a weak or compromised immune system, you're susceptible to a lot of viruses, including the coronavirus, which of course then's the contradiction. During stage 4, people are limited to 1 hour of exercise / sunlight per day. Gyms are still shut here in throughout all of Victoria, and gyms are both good for physical and mental health. There's still a lot of community sport, which is not taking place. Exercise, fresh air, vitamin D, that is all a much better, you would say, antidote, improving your immune system against the coronavirus.
Yeah, I mean, the things that we're putting up with, even psychologically, are directly impacting our immunity. The fact that we don't have any structure to what's announced until the day that it happens, it's crazy. It's psychological abuse, the way that I look at it. It doesn't make any sense as to why we'd do that anyway. But, you know, restricting our fresh air in particular, you know, I've heard of a few people.
Well.
Yeah. So with the masks, you know, we've had no education surrounding the correct use of PPE. To mandate that without education is a disgrace to me. And then you see these people that have come down with strep throat because of dirty masks that they've worn all day. They've got bacteria lodged in their throat. It's created a new problem. And these are all just adding to the list of struggles that we're facing as Victorians. You know, I'd imagine a lot of us have been victim of unhealthy behaviours going through this, trying to cope psychologically as well. And these all have a massive impact on the immune system.
But Daniel Andrews is now, as I call it, got a mask fetish because he's taken the face covering mandate to a fitted mask mandate, and he hasn't given an end date. What did he say on Sunday? That masks are a part of our culture now. Well, it's not part of my culture.
Yeah, it's very difficult not to throw things at the screen when he talks, honestly. I was watching that and I heard him say that and I thought, no, we've got to get rid of them. We have to get rid of them. In particular, some workplaces as well, where it's just not safe to wear them and be able to effectively communicate. There's a lot of risk involved in wearing them for certain activities. And it's just a joke that all of these things are being overlooked. And then culturally as well, you know, we've got the armies of Karens turning around to have a go at anyone who's not wearing one, even though people have legitimate medical reasons not to.
And it also says on the DHS website that some people can't wear masks because of past trauma, those sorts of things. Yet the Karens in the store just assume that they're anti-maskers, selfish people, and screech at them.
Yeah, what we're experiencing is a culture shift. And so it's been okay for them to do that to us because no one has said anything. Unfortunately, what's going to have to happen is people who do have these legitimate lawful reasons not to wear them are going to need to really step up to the plate and do it and have those confrontations as politely and respectfully as possible, because it's no one else's business what your medical conditions are. And I know that for a lot of us anyway, you can go on the DHS website and have a look at the list of reasons as to why you don't have to wear one. And you can probably find one that actually matches one of your circumstances. And it really is that simple, finding what your reason is, being able to stand by that and be able to prove that if you're contested on it. So, yeah, I think we really need to try and address that from a cultural perspective, more than just through their parliamentary systems and so on.
And before the mask mandate came in, it was the Karens were all about the enforcing the social distancing. If you came within a veneer of their space, they'd also screech at you. And jumping back to the mask for a moment, I still see when I'm driving around people in their cars solo wearing a mask, and I'm like.
Honestly, no words, really. That's what we're dealing with. I don't know what it is about Melbourne in particular, the psychology aspect. I don't know. I don't even want to go there almost, because I can't comprehend why you'd do that. In particular, because of how it puts you at risk of having an accident on a hot day. It pains me to think about the future when it comes to that.
Oh, Melbourne's not alone in that regard with those. We should call them overmaskers. Because I think there was a meme spread around the other day. I don't know where this woman was from, but she was driving not just with a mask, but also a face shield as well.
It's just funny. I mean, we know anyway that virus particles are small enough to fit through them. It should be socially acceptable to not wear them. To wear more of them, I don't get it. I mean, I've had doctors literally laugh at me in the emergency room for whipping one out when I've got someone coughing hysterically next to me. But, you know, that was always with the knowledge that they work for around 20 minutes if you've got a fresh mask. And that's true, they do. But who changes their mask every 20 minutes? So Not only that, but it's not good enough to protect against this particular virus anyway. So what's the point?
Exactly. Now, a lot of people thought that when the initial stage 4 6-week lockdown was due to expire on September 14th, that's when we're all going to be set free again. How very wrong all of those people were. It's at October 19th today, and we've only just taken a first major step, and that's obviously when a lot of the activists wanted to get out, become more active, and including add on to the street. And then, of course, there was that Freedom Day that was planned for the Shrine of Remembrance on September the 5th, and Victoria Police went to every and all measures they could to stop people going there as much as they could. There was Fanos Peniidis, James Bartolo, Zoe Bueller, a few other people were charged with incitement, which we still don't know how that charge is going to stack up in court. And we haven't seen him for a while. Assistant Commissioner Luke Cornelius, Chief Wiggum, get up with his batshit crazy grandstanding and saying your feet won't even touch the ground when you go to a protest. And then we saw the police on the day in the full riot gear, the helicopters. They were there the next week at the Shrine of Remembrance. I'm not sure if you were thinking about attending the Freedom Day, but they certainly, it's fair to say, wanted to instill fear in the citizens not to go there.
Yeah, the whole situation was a little bit tricky because of the way it was timed. The initial date for the 13th was fine, and then it got a bit weird, got changed to the 5th. Yeah, the mess around on the date, I think, was people's primary hesitation with wanting to go, in particular because Daniel Andrews tends to make his decisions based on what we do. So having his announcement come out on the 6th, the day after a protest, was not ever going to work in our favour, you know. And had that been a big turnout, I'd imagine he would have used it as an excuse to further restrict the freedoms. And you know, when you look at the fact that we were supposed to come out of lockdown a little bit earlier, he's now bumped it up to the 1st of November. With the announcement of another protest coming up, it's a no-brainer for me that he really is playing the game to see what the public does in response to him. And that's really going to have some sort of sway in his decision-making from my perspective.
Even though, well, you look at the 5th, that was at the Shrine. The 13th, that was at the Vic Market. Then the week after that, there was the Elwood beach protest. And then 2 weeks after that, I think there was you wouldn't say St Kilda Beach protest, but just the St Kilda Beach gatherings, because it was a warm Friday night. Those were all condemned by Dan Andrews, but where are the clusters from that? Where are the clusters from people being out in the open air on a hot day?
Well, that's exactly right. You know, where are the clusters in Coles, Woolworths and Bunnings? Like, this is what we've sort of been saying from the beginning. It's not there. It's not happening. A lot of this stuff is false positives. And so what we're being given is a whole lot of theatrics, really, with our freedoms, and it begs the question why. And, you know, I'm so disappointed that we still have to, because in a way we do need to play the game a little bit to get our freedom back just enough to be able to peacefully assemble, because we can't do that under the 4 reasons to leave the house. So until that lifts, we can't organise a lawful protest. But it keeps coming up. And so, yeah, it's just a bit of a back and forth at the moment. It's very frustrating.
Because the upcoming protest or Freedom Day that you're referring to is the one on it's not the grand final public holiday anymore. It's the thank you public holiday. I'm not sure if it's Dan thanking us or we're supposed to thank him. But that's being organised at the Shrine. I don't think there's been any statement yet from Dan or Victoria Police about how they're going to deal with that, because the current outdoor gathering rules is that it's a maximum of 10 people from 2 households. Obviously, that's not as restrictive as it was on September 5, but we've seen, well, with the Freedom Day in New South Wales on September the 5th, the limit on outdoor gatherings, including protest, is 20. That was very brutally suppressed by New South Wales Police as well.
Yeah, in saying that, though, from what I've observed anyway, police interstate seem to be upholding their general standards of respect, whilst down here, it's been very unpredictable the way Victoria Police has handled it. Sometimes you get good ones, but a lot of the time what we're seeing is a really strong hand. And, straight into a hard-handed response with unarmed, compliant people. It's very strange the way that's playing out. And so I think, they've really shown their cards in that respect, and that's put a lot of people off. But, the second that these 4 reasons to leave your house is gone, we're out there. There will be some form of protest. I have no doubt in my mind, because we've been silenced on that front for a very long time now.
And all Victorians are never going to forget how Victoria Police behaved during this time. They've got a lot of respect to earn back from the public. I think we're out of luck and lost Millie again. She'll join us back in a moment. Again, while she's getting back, I'll take the opportunity to remind the audience that you can participate throughout the show on Entropy. We can ask a question and also send through a super chat. We're doing so well there until it froze again. But obviously, we're approaching summer here. So obviously, or just referring to people outside on hot days, you've got a very low chance of getting the virus. That's why I refer it to virus frying weather. Obviously, in the northern hemisphere, they're going into winter there, which is obviously when viruses they become more spread throughout the community more. And we're seeing, northern hemisphere European nations and various American states going back into lockdowns as well. The UK is obviously the worst with their 3-tier lockdown approach. There's currently a standoff in Manchester with a local mayor not wanting to go to red high alert lockdown. So there's a standoff there with the Johnson Conservative government, who, they've hardly been, even though they're a centre-right government, they've been a total nanny status when it comes to the coronavirus. Obviously, with the US election, it's now just over 2 weeks away, and obviously Trump has recovered from the virus. He's back doing rallies. His fast recovery has certainly, I think, had an impact on the COVID debate there. I was just saying, Millie, we were doing so well, and then you dropped out again.
I know, it was a good stint.
Yes. But I was just getting to Victoria Police they've lost a lot of respect, and they've got a lot to earn back the trust of the people once we open up again.
Yeah, most definitely. The way in particular they've treated women, pregnant women and the elderly, that's a lot of PR work to recover from. And, I know a lot of them as well don't agree with some of the things that have gone on. So, not to put a blanket statement over them, but yeah, what they've done is really not acceptable to the general public from some of the footage that I've witnessed, in particular choking a female as a male officer and having a female officer stand there and do nothing about it. That's the sort of stuff that really irks me when we look at, the continuum, the force continuum and stuff like that. It's so disproportionate on the very foundation of the way that functions. It just perplexes me.
Let's also remember that man who was having a mental health episode, who police hit him with their car, and one of the officers stomped on his head. And that was on the same day as the Vic Market protest. It had nothing to do with protesting, but Dan Andrews, when he was asked about it on the Monday, there's footage of him saying, this wouldn't be necessary if people didn't protest. No, it had nothing to do with the protest. Not every person who the police are dealing with currently is a protester. And thankfully, as the horrific reality of that incident was reported on, it's been referred to IBAC now, the state anti-corruption body, and the deputy Commissioner Neil Patterson said yes, it looked like what do you say? Not disproportionate, inappropriate use of force. Yeah, no shit.
Yeah, definitely. And to put it in contrast, we had an incident as well in Tasmania not too long ago where there was a man holding a knife and he was in the street. He had lots of cops interacting with him, put down the knife. He was trying to go towards them. It was very clear that that man was in distress and trying to commit suicide by police fire, which does happen, pretty frequently. And they used their car to knock him to the ground. They did it very tastefully. And it's a fine line sometimes, and to me, witnessing that one and seeing how delicately they handled that, they were able to get this man on the ground, subdued just enough, but not seriously injured. And they were able to arrest him because of that. So there's a balance there where you can see the intent behind some of their actions. But yeah, I mean, the incident you referenced, it was absolutely disgusting. I couldn't even watch it in full. It made me so angry. There's nothing worse than abuse of power, in particular because the use of force continuum is so clear about what is and isn't proportionate for everyone, not even just for police. So it's pretty disturbing.
And especially at a time when you've got Dan Andrews basically defending and egging on the police state. Like you said, I'm not in the business of criticising Victoria Police. They've done an outstanding job this year.
Yeah, definitely. And an outstanding job doing what? Enforcing your rules. Pretty much the same way you deliver them, just as gracefully. They sort of go hand in hand. It's really unfortunate.
Now, this isn't the first time you've been politically active. You're in the media a number of years ago when the same-sex marriage debate was dominating the news cycle, because you are actually a donor-conceived child. You're raised by lesbian parents, and you just basically talked about your story of not knowing your father, and your position was obviously at the time there was a lot of emotions were running high and a lot of stories were twisted, but your position was basically that children such as yourself in your position deserve to know who their parents are, and that it should be, well, we did have some form of plebiscite in the end, the postal survey. But obviously that would have been incredibly hard to tell your experience.
I'm pretty disappointed, Tim. We did agree we weren't going to touch that one because it's not super relevant to what we're going through. So I'm pretty disappointed that you brought that up, because I was very clear about the fact that I don't want to take focus off what's going on here.
No,
but
I'm just establishing it.
Yeah, well, we did agree we wouldn't touch it. So as I said, I'm disappointed. But in saying that, my stance was very clear that what I had to say back then was personal testimony. So it was coming from a place of love and consideration for individual rights as well. So the donor conception community had a lot of major mental health issues behind the scenes, in particular having third-party reproduction be glamorized. And that was a direct result of some of the narrative that we were seeing surrounding the same-sex marriage debate. So for me, it was really important to educate people about some of the negative effects surrounding third-party reproduction and then put a balancing narrative out there. So I guess when you go through something personal like that, you have an obligation, if you know better from firsthand experience, to come out and spread your story to help shape what the future looks like in that department. And the last thing I wanted was to see any detrimental effects come to the donor conception community because of a very silencing narrative.
That's all I wanted to establish with you. I know that we talked about this pre-show, that we weren't going to distract the focus. That's all I wanted to establish with you. So I don't believe we did break our pre-show chat. So that's just all I wanted to establish, that you'd been in the public eye before. Yeah,
look, we did break it, but, it was sort of for me to come out of the closet with that one, I suppose. And I hadn't touched on it for that reason. But, it's out there. I'm not hiding it. But, yeah, it is what it is.
Now, obviously, we've seen during particularly in Victoria with the second wave, the politics of the lockdown get quite toxic, especially online. We've seen the I Stand With Dan crew, who a lot of them we've found out are pretty much Dan droids, viciously going after pretty much anyone, not just partisan people who obviously have an ideological opposition to the lockdown, but daring to even ask Daniel Andrews legitimate questions. Like, we've even seen ABC journalists such as Raphael Epstein and Patricia Karvelis being viciously attacked online for asking legitimate questions. And he's described as dictator Dan. The I Stand With Dan people, they certainly elevate him to a dictator, and that you shouldn't be allowed to question him.
Yeah, it's interesting watching the back and forth. The best gauge for that, I think, is the comment sections in the news media. So I'm on there quite a lot, just having a look at the balance of people saying yes and no. A lot of the pushback from the public in that respect has really helped balance the playing field. So we've had a lot of people jump on there and really start spreading facts to really subdue a lot of the Dan supporters on this one, because I think both sides of the argument are more than legitimate, but one is, again, trying to be silenced. And we see that a lot in our media anyway. So it's good to see the balance come back to the people a little bit. I don't think it's all too far gone. I think it is quite 50-50 lately, from what I've seen at least.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed a shift. One of the articles I wrote on the Unshackled was I Stand With Dan cult crumbling, because during the first stage of the second lockdown, the stage 3, they were definitely the majority on, or at least Twitter. But I've definitely noticed as the stage 4 lockdown dragged on, and especially when we saw the police state fully on display. Again, I'm a member of most of the anti-lockdown, anti-Dan groups on Facebook, but I definitely noticed a shift in social media activity against Dan. The Twitter hashtag was sort of being used more ironically, and definitely I would sort of the memes against Dan becoming definitely, I would say, more out there, definitely more crass, and which is fine by me, because a lot of what we see these days is sort of meme warfare and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely essential that we produce good content in that area. And that's what a lot of us do. I think we fall back on our memes. Not only is it clever, but it really subdues the fear in people, gives us a bit of comedy, some good things to wake up to in our day. They're sort of the saving grace at the moment, I think.
Probably I would say the most popular, I would say, video memer at the moment is the real Rukshan Fernando, who I've had on my show as well. I'm sure you've seen a lot of his videos as well. I'm not sure if you're aware of his background. He and his wife ran a wedding business, which has obviously been destroyed this year. So what better way to spend his time at home than get back at the people who shut down his business?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's the best weapon we have, honestly. It's going very well. I encourage everyone to sit at home and come up with some new ones.
Now, obviously, we are sort of, on the brink of finally getting the full permitted reasons to leave the home scrap, where we'll be able to leave for any reason. And I'm not sure about you, but I think back to last year and it's like, wow, we could leave the home for any reason. We didn't need to wear a mask. We could go to a wild house party with how many people, no questions asked, go down to the servo at 4 a.m. for whatever. All that freedom's been taken away in 2020.
Yeah, I think honestly, once these restrictions start to lift, we're going to see a lot of people going back to normal. I would say it's part of a trauma response as well. People are going to be wanting to cling to their previous idea of normal. Once they get their freedom back, it's going to feel some type of way. And we're going to see a lot of that. And we're going to come to a point, I think, where it's going to be too difficult to police it. And I think once we're out, it's going to be very difficult to get us back in without a good reason.
Wes, as I was padding time when you dropped out again, Europe going back into second lockdown, particularly the UK with their, traffic light 3-tier lockdown approach. They're basically going through the demoralization we went through when we went into the second lockdown, that we got a taste of freedom. We thought it was over, and then we had to go back in. And it just feels like that because obviously we've got a lot of the vaccines in stage 3 clinical trials now, that sort of it seems to be leading to that's only going to be the only way to normal. We often talk about COVID normal. Obviously, to get back to, it seems to be that if we want to get back to full normal, then it's obviously going to be the vaccine.
Yeah, that's what they're really laying the groundwork for at the moment with their COVID normal. That's what they're pushing. It really is leading towards a vaccine. Anyone who's paying attention, though, would notice the vaccine trials are a little bit hit and miss. And that's indicative of just how much they are rushing this. And, you know, when we look at the necessity, it doesn't affect 99% of people negatively in the future anyway. So why would we vaccinate for it? And then it also begs the question, would it actually prevent the virus? So, you know, I'm one of the people that are really fiercely rejecting the COVID normal and will continue to really do so. I think it's important to reject these culture shifts as they come up.
We know that the Morrison government, they've locked in those deals with the Oxford vaccine trial and also the University of Queensland. Scott Morrison has said it's going to be a free and voluntary vaccine, though what hit the news this week is that when international travel resumes, the Morrison government, they're going to have those digital declaration cards, which can include if you've taken a vaccine. I hope you don't mind if I just play the focus bit of the press conference with Acting Immigration Minister Alan Tudge and Stuart Robert, the Government Services Minister. And we all remember the flashback to Stuart Robert, who claimed that the Centrelink website MyGov website was hacked when it just increased capacity when people lost their job when businesses shut down.
We'll announce today, we'll have a discussion paper out today and a tender out next week for a whole of government permission capability. This capability is to build a simple and easy way for Australians and other to engage with permissions, be it a visa, be it a customs permission, be it an agricultural permission. The first use case for the whole of government permission project will be a simple visa and of course digitising the incoming passenger card, and then we'll build out the entire suite of government permissions. Pass to Minister Tudge to talk about the first use cases. Tudgey.
Thanks very much, Stuart. So the very first use case that will be underway and we hope to have completed by this time next year is to digitise the incoming passenger card. So at the moment, everybody who arrives into Australia, be you a foreigner or an Aussie, you would complete this card and it has your contact information, your details, as well as some of the biosecurity information. That obviously is sometimes difficult to read. It takes time to manually process this, and in the future when we need to be able to contact trace people, we of course would like that information to be able to get to health authorities immediately rather than having to go through the process of entering the data and across to them. So from this time next year, our expectation is that we'll no longer need this incoming passenger card because we'll have a fully digital incoming passenger card. And what's more, by having a digital product, in the future, should there be a globally available vaccine, we'll be able to attach an authentic vaccination certificate to the incoming passenger card so that we will know if a person has indeed had that vaccination or not, and therefore they will be able to enter into Australia potentially without quarantining. Furthermore, by digitising this, we have much greater authenticity and integrity associated with who the individual is, because typically you'd do this on your phone. An image would be taken of your face, which would match up to your passport to ensure there is integrity in relation to the identity of the individual. And of course, from a contact tracing perspective, it means that we'll be able to immediately have the information connected into contact tracing capability in each of the state and territories' jurisdictions, should they need it. So this is a significant development. As Minister Roberts said, we'll be putting this tender out next week, and our ambition is to have this available for us next year. And this is just another further step in our efforts to slowly reopen and safely reopen the Australian borders, so that we can allow more people to leave the country and more people to come into the country.
We should just remind Australians as well that you cannot leave. It's illegal for you to leave Australia at the moment unless it's for an approved reason. Only Australians can return unless they're granted an exemption, like Tom Hanks to come back to filming his movie with Baz Luhrmann. But this is what a lot of people have been fearful of about the new normal, which is increased surveillance. We're told it's for contact tracing purposes now, but still, people are rightly skeptical of being constantly tracked.
Yeah, this is where people need to actually draw the line in the sand. We cannot say yes to this. This is the beginning of the end of our freedom permanently if we surrender that. The idea that this vaccine is like this miracle cure as well is just illogical from the get-go. We don't even know if it's going to work. The flu is still around. There's a vaccine for that. You know, these are all really relevant things. So what is it that we're allowing them to digitize us for? There's no real reason to do it for this virus. So yeah, my stance on this is to say no and fight against that as fiercely as you can.
Well, they'll promote it as a ticket back to freedom. And yeah, you will be free to do all the things you used to do. But the thing is, you'll be surveilled. Your privacy will be violated, because even though a lot of this data will be collected and nobody will look at it, it can be hacked. Unauthorized access can fall into people's hands who've got an agenda. And of course, if the state does want to target you, they know everything about you.
Yeah, I mean, our data is already peddled around. We have very little privacy in the social media space. Where do we draw the line? It just comes down to that. You know, do you want them to be able to make it up as they go along and give you freedom back when they feel like it? Digitize it, say what is and isn't acceptable to refuse entry for. It's really that simple. Once we surrender to that, you could really be refused travel for any reason they deem fit. And it's not right. It's not the direction I think any of us want to go. And we need to actually think about these things before they come in.
I know that when we briefly opened up here in Victoria, when you went to dine in at a cafe, restaurant or pub, you had to manually sign in, but you could just put fake details if you wanted. So you could sign your name as, what is it, Bill Gates, and your phone number 123456789. But I was listening to Gladys Berejiklian's press conference today, and she's talking about they want to roll out more and more QR codes. And I know that's what New Zealand is doing as well, which is for those who are technologically literate, you with your camera smartphone, you check in with this QR code and that all your personal information goes there.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. I was under Jane Doe under those circumstances. No, I just don't see the reason for it. I really don't.
And we've seen, what is it, with the COVID Safe app. You remember that?
Yeah, absolute flop.
Yeah, flop of the year, I'd say. And I think, what is it, Victoria hasn't tracked any cases from it. I mean, they still managed to trace all their cases until recently using fax machine and post-it notes. But I think New South Wales got about 2 cases from COVID Safe.
Yeah, I think it's kind of promising for us, at least, to know that a lot of people didn't agree with having the app because of privacy concerns, even though we have very little privacy on our phones anyway. But it was actually good to see people reject it and not want to have anything to do with it. So there is hope, I think, to rejecting this digital passport nonsense.
And also the fact that this grand plan of the government for this universal app fell down as well, because governments, although they are capable of massive overreach, surveillance and evil, they are still, as we've seen in Victoria, very incompetent, and there's heaps of disasters that they oversee.
And honestly, I'm glad. I don't think we should be so dependent on apps and technology for things that are perfectly fine manually. So good. Keep having the technical difficulties.
So obviously we are coming to the end of 2020. I wish we could take a vaccine that would make us forget 2020. That'd be good. But where do you see 2021 heading? I honestly have no idea. I am looking forward to getting my freedom back very soon to come and go as I please, and also to the day where we don't have to wear masks. But I definitely hope that every Melbournian Victorian remembers what we went through. Is that what you hope as well? Because next state election isn't going to be until 2022. If it's probably won't be Daniel Andrews at the helm by then, but definitely this horrid experience needs to be grained in Victorians' memories.
Well, one thing that's going to be a challenge for us is the fact that they did extend the state of emergency into next year. So what I think is going to happen, honestly, is we will get our freedom back. They'll still be setting up the future in regards to what they want with the digital passports and things like that. All those agendas will continue to play out. The difference is that enough people will have their freedom that it will be insignificant. We're going to suffer a bit of a burnout here in Victoria from everything that we've been through. And so it's going to make it a little bit challenging to stay on top of the next phase of agendas that are coming in, because they do want to change the way our society runs. And so I think we're going to need to be a little bit vigilant going into the future. Enjoy our freedom, sure, but really stay on top of the things that they do try and change in the background as we do that.
Well, there's going to be activists such as yourself. There's also new activist groups that have been born, such as Reignite Democracy Australia. We've seen Victoria Ford as well. I could name countless. There's various business lobby groups. As I mentioned, you were extremely busy with those mass email campaigns, which against the omnibus bill. That lobbying it's an incredibly difficult, hard labor and stressful job. I should just ask you, what was it like to organize such campaigns? Because it's sort of, race against time, really.
Oh, it's insane. Yeah, there's so much work that goes into it, honestly, networking behind the scenes, in particular with politicians as well, to get these things done. And a lot of them, they have an understanding of what we want to achieve. And, we sort of go, hey, what would you need from the public to be able to make this happen? Or how can we best fight this? And there's a good push and pull between us and some of our politicians at the moment. So it really helps us to formulate what type of email campaign we need for any given outcome. But yeah, sometimes we all obviously know each other within the activism community. So, wherever possible, we like to get things done together and really push out certain things like the omnibus. email campaign, which I think was great. You know, we had 10,000 emails by the time, you know, the submission for the SARC inquiry had ended in a 48-hour window to really get that done. So it was really good.
And I know to that point, until Dan capitulated on the preventative detention power, none of the activists who'd emerged since the beginning of the pandemic and lockdown had much success. So it was a good feeling to finally have, and Dan's attitude said, "Oh, it's been dropped now. There's no point in talking about it anymore," which is sort of, obviously that's typical Dan style, but it certainly gave us much more hope than we'd had over the past month.
Yeah, I think we're discovering his weak spots as we go. So by pushing certain things, we really find out what the outcome is. I mean, we saw with the curfew issue how quickly that was dropped. These are things that, you know, like you notice these things as they come up. Once they get contested, is it a human rights violation? Is it going to hold up in court? If the answer is no, chances are he's going to drop it. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes.
He capitulated about the curfew because there's that ongoing Supreme Court challenge to the curfew by that Mornington Peninsula restaurateur, and there's also the new High Court challenge about, that's a bit more of an ambitious one about intrastate freedom of movement. They had first hearings on Friday. Dan's Solicitor General has until tomorrow to decide how they'll respond. So it'll be a big D-Day tomorrow with obviously the hotel quarantine extraordinary hearings there. But yeah, Dan seems to, well, I'll just be crass. He seems to shit himself when sort of it's actually put before the courts and he's like, oh no, like I could be actually extremely humiliated here.
Yeah, definitely. You know, even with everything to do with the hotel quarantine, it is so amazing to me the amount that they've been able to get away with lying about. You know, in government, things have to go through a very specific paper trail to go through. We know who ordered what, like just based on how their structure of paperwork really works. So the fact that, you know, that hasn't come up, there's no one to really blame. Yeah, he just is making a bit of a fool of himself to a lot of people who know better. And we can only hope to really push him where it hurts in the future. And that's really what we're all getting at. We're really coming up with a lot behind the scenes to get that done going forward. So it's exciting.
And obviously, Peter Credlin, every night she's on Sky, she learns a bit more. She spent the weekend going through the new document dump. She took her Friday night show off to go through it and had some excellent new information about unified security, and she was Tony Abbott's chief of staff, so she's not intimidated, deterred, or anything. She's like, I'm just warming up here. You know, I'm not gonna go away. I'm gonna get to the truth.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's good to see it happen now, but for me at least, I look at it and I think, why didn't it happen sooner?
Yeah,
it's not like they're incapable. All of it is a bit of a puppet show. Now the narrative's twisted a little bit. They have to adapt to that due to public pushback. They're aware of that. So there's got to be someone in journalism to fill that void. And that person is Peter Credlin. So, you know, where she's doing a good job, it really, you know, it's disappointing as well, because it's like this could have happened a lot sooner and it would have been very helpful.
Yeah, better late than never, I guess. But yeah, Credlin is the only mainstream media program I recommend now. That's why start my show at 7 so I can watch Credlin and then, well, report on in my opening what she's reported on as well, because she stays up, I think, all hours of the night to go through these documents. She's a qualified lawyer and barrister as well. I'm not sure how deep you got into some of these sort of documents and legislation and that. There's a lot of pages to read.
Yeah, it takes me a couple of glasses of red to sit down and really go through that stuff. In particular, the omnibus as well. It flicked you around to so many different reference points. So, you know, it's good to know your legislation a little bit at the very least so that you can understand what they're trying to push through at any given time. But yeah, It's a bit of a pain trying to get the hang of it initially.
Because just to give a bit of insight, the Omnibus Bill references a whole bunch of existing laws about how it works with that. And so you've got to look up that to see what's that all about and how it's all interconnected, and that it's very complicated.
Yeah, and that was a lot of the confusion as well. A lot of the people were under the impression that it was just brand new legislation, but it had been in effect for 6 months already. And that's how we are looking at the Supreme Court footage and things like that. It was through that legislation that those things were stipulated, because it's not normal to be able to live stream, your court appearances and things like that. So yeah, there was a lot of good in there, but they had a few sneaky clauses, and that's really what we had to let people understand, is that it's not the entire bit of legislation. It's not realistic. They likely won't move to bin the whole thing because of the things that are in there that are actually productive. And so, what we were really pushing for was to get these clauses moved, split, or amended.
I know that some of the crossbenchers who passed the Omnibus Bill, Fiona Patten and Samantha the Ratnan, they're quite condescending, saying, "Oh, people don't understand most of what this Omnibus Bill is. Most of it is just continuation of virtual stuff." And I was sitting there saying, "Yeah, we know that. That's not what we're talking about with our concerns about the Omnibus Bill."
Yeah, it was interesting because Fiona Patten had initially on the Bolt report taken a bit of a different stance.
This was on the state of emergency.
The state of emergency, yeah, but it sort of it ties into my perception of her in general. So, seeing that and how her narrative flipped through the state of emergency, I was a bit concerned because it seemed like she had really opposing views. So, I don't know, maybe she was influenced somehow. It was a bit inconsistent for me. I don't really know, but it just gives you an idea of like the behind the scenes politics that must go on between them to have them change their views so rapidly.
There's a lot of real life House of Cards activity going on. Politics, I'm sure you've noticed, is full of a lot of different power plays and things, and you get screwed over, lied to. Politics is it's a brutal and got to be tough as nails. I couldn't imagine being a politician.
Yeah, and I guess where pages like Voice for Victoria and Reignite Democracy, they really come in handy because it really breaks down how all this stuff works. When a lot of the people in the public, they don't know how the systems work and how to actually fight these things as they come up. So I guess the positive outcome is that a lot of us have become more politically savvy throughout the experience.
And we should finish off by reminding people that there is a vote on in Victoria at the moment, local government elections. You would have got your ballot in the mail. It doesn't display party affiliation on the ballot, but the sites better than me, which disclose the allegiances of the local government candidates.
One thing I'll say is that Reignite Democracy is probably the page you want to head to for that one. She's actually done a breakdown of who to vote for if you want to really stay in line with some of the values that we hold within the activism community. So I'd probably scoot you over to her, or keep tabs on Voice for Victoria, because we tend to do a lot of updates on that stuff as well. So you can have a look at where your vote would be going before it happens.
And it is compulsory to vote in Victorian local government elections. And if you don't vote, then you get a fine. And last thing I think anyone wants at this stage is, government fining people more. So make sure you vote.
Yeah, voting is important.
Well, I've enjoyed finally sitting down to have a chat with you, Millie. I'm glad that, we seem to be at the end now, but you know as well as me that we can't ever let our guard down and also never forget what we've been through.
Definitely. I guess now we've got to really repair the damage and get prepared for what's coming in the future. But yeah, it's been really good to chat, finally.
And that's the show for this Monday. Of course, we'll be back with the usual midweek, sometimes weekly edition of WilmsFront, 7 p.m. Melbourne time. on the WilmsFront YouTube, DLive and Unshackled's Facebook page. And of course, keep checking out the unshackled.net for our latest Unshackled productions and also publications as well. Have a good night, everybody, not just here in Melbourne, but throughout Australia. And I'll see you next show.
Thanks for tuning in to WilmsFront. Visit timwilms.com or Rational Rise TV to view the archive of episodes. And keep visiting the unshackled.net to view all our shows. And to keep up with the latest real news and analysis.